Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Voices for Social Justice. This is a podcast where we engage in raw and authentic conversations about computing education and social justice issues in America today. I'm your host, Lien Diaz, Director at the Constellation Center for Equity in Computing at Georgia Tech. I am totally excited about this episode. Today, we're focusing on bias and fairness in algorithms. That means we're talking about AI, we're talking about machine learning, and of course, data and privacy issues. We're going to be addressing questions that touch on social media addiction, perhaps, privacy on the internet, and not just for ourselves, but our kids and our families as well. We're going to talk about how computers learn human behavior over time, which can shape how and what you think and believe. And here at the Constellation Center, we're particularly concerned about how data is being collected and used with minoritized groups, our communities of color, on women, and low-income communities. We believe that lack of information and misinformation on this topic will continue to marginalize these groups. So these are very important conversations to be having, especially because this episode is timely with the 2020 presidential election happening, and voting has already started in many states, including in Georgia. So we're going to talk about how AI and machine learning play a role in this election on the candidates and its results. So we have a lot to unpack, and to do so, I am joined by two amazing experts in the field, Dr. Swati Gupta and Dr. Wenke Lee. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah.
Swati is a Fouts Family Early Career Professor and Assistant Professor at Georgia Tech's Machine Learning Center and in the H. Milton Stewart School of Industrial Systems and Engineering. Her research interests lie primarily in combinatorial, convex, and robust optimization with applications in online learning and data-driven decision-making under partial information. Swati's work focuses on speeding up fundamental bottlenecks that arise in learning problems due to the combinatorial nature of the decisions, as well as drawing from machine learning to improve traditional optimization methods. Wenke is a professor and John P. Imlay Jr. Chair in Georgia Tech School of Computer Science. He is also the director of the Institute for Information Security and Privacy at Georgia Tech. Wenke's research interests include systems and network security, applied cryptography, and machine learning. Most recently, he has focused on botnet detection and malware analysis, security of mobile systems and apps, detection and mitigation of information manipulation on the internet, and adversarial machine learning. Again, I'm really excited to be speaking with both of you today, and I just want to jump right into this conversation. If you don't mind, let's just, get started on this. I want to begin with bias and fairness first. Swati, maybe you can start us off with this question. We, in computing education, we often couch the study of computing innovations in terms of beneficial and harmful effects on society. From your perspective, how does anyone make sure that they are not introducing their bias into a given system?
So I guess this is a big question, and the bias is introduced in the system. I think to understand how we should not make systems that are biased, we need to understand why are systems biased in the first case, right, as a first step. And one of the reasons for this is interaction with real world data that is also generated by humans who have their own biases, or who have their own human nature. And due to data being generated by processes that have some historical biases baked in, or it might be due to data that is collected partially on certain groups, and you don't have so much engagement with the technology of other groups. So there are multiple ways in which data itself gets biased. And then comes the sort of the algorithm design or the machine learning question. As let's say we're designing a machine learning system, right? Then the question becomes, what is the question we are asking when we design a machine learning system? Should the question really be, let's say prediction of recidivism scores, like how likely is somebody to reoffend? Or should the machine learning system try to predict whether somebody has the circumstances that get them to reoffend? Or should the machine learning system be about disseminating resources at people where it can have the most impact in terms of, improving the conditions? Or maybe should the machine learning system look at the judiciary and see, if judges are being biased or if police officers are biased? Like, what is the right question? And once we decide on the right question, the thing to understand is that with the algorithms, we are telling algorithms a particular worldview through the way we model systems, and that modeling itself can hide certain things from an algorithm or make it transparent to the algorithm. For instance, the choice of variables, like, are you actually measuring interest or are you just looking at click-through rates? And there's no way we can actually measure interest, but we can interest of a person in a recommendation or an advertisement, right? We can look at whether they clicked on that or not, or whether they pondered over it or not with their mouse, right? So how do you even measure interest? And that's something that goes into the machine learning system. And then let's think about an application with recommendation systems, right? Is the system actually trying to engage people more? Is the system trying to show them things that are better for them? Is it, what is it that we are trying to actually get out of a system? And then there comes sort of the feedback loop. Whatever the system is, it's trying to learn from the interaction with people back within the system itself. Like, people interact with the system, they generate more data, and that data itself is then learned by the system. So what I'm trying to say is there is so much to unpack here in terms of, starting from how the data is itself generated. Is it encoding some biases that are baked in that we don't want our systems to propagate, or don't want our systems to enhance because of automation? And going all the way from how are we thinking about the questions to answer, what are the models we're using, what are the techniques, and ultimately how people interact with them, and what is the impact we have on people, as consumers or as users. What is it to be on their end?
Yeah, so you talked a little bit about, the modeling systems, how we model systems, and of course that, bias is introduced by humans. My follow-up question to you is, are some systems then inadvertently built to ultimately have, perhaps harmful effects or effects that weren't really intended?
Right. So we actually see a lot of such unintended consequences of automation, and this is why it's been such an active area of research, where we are getting in people from policy, law, ethics, social sciences, political sciences, computer science, and friends, to sort of come together and talk about these issues and try to understand how we can build a holistic solution. Let me maybe give you a very maybe a tangible example of this. Let's say there is a company that receives 1 million applicants for a particular job. It's not possible for a human to actually go through, or a team of HR managers to go through 1 million applications and look at the resumes and then narrow it down to, let's say, 50 resumes that you want to see and interview and actually have for the job. And this is where AI and machine learning is amazing, because you can actually then have the power to go through the resumes very fast and have a resume screening algorithm that can shortlist these resumes for you. Now, what might have happened in the past is that the company might have, so what is the algorithm sort of feeding on? The algorithm is looking at, so there are some resumes, and I want to tell whether this resume is a good resume or not. And to tell whether a certain resume is a good fit for the job or not, I might have some historical data that tells me which resumes have been looked at with a good light and which resumes have been looked at with a bad light, right? And that data itself could be biased. And so there are a lot of studies that have, for instance, sent exactly the same resumes with just the names of the candidates changed, and they see that the callback rates or the salaries offers differ a lot based on demographic groups. Right. And so this is the thing that we want to mitigate by using algorithms. We don't want algorithms to pick up on these trends that are there due to historical reasons or societal biases, and we don't want to develop algorithms that would propagate these trends. In fact, we want to have algorithms that will say, look, these resumes are actually very good because these are the superstars in, let's say, superstars that are incomparable because of very diverse backgrounds. So these are the superstars who seem to be most promising on really objective metrics, or maybe a combination of different things. Yeah.
Yeah. So, Wenke, let me follow up with you on this issue of, again, back to the notion of beneficial and harmful effects. Like, how I have a two-part question for you. One is, how does all of these data and the biases, how does that present? How does that impact people from marginalized communities in particular? And I think I wanted to ask you in terms of beneficial and harmful effects, but also on a question on privacy. Like, where does the issue of privacy fit into the conversation of bias and fairness in data?
Yeah, so okay, the first part of the question, I think some of the bias, of course, I mean, like Swati was saying, that sometimes it's due to some limitation of the human knowledge, right? So you just inadvertently introduce bias. But sometimes, in the classical machine learning task, you just collect data that represents the real world distribution of the data. I suppose you want to have data that represents the population, right? And obviously there's some group that are in the minority, very extreme minority, for example, right? And a classical machine learning algorithm, some algorithm, they just want to focus on the accuracy on the, let's say, on the bigger picture. So let's say if this group was only 1%, and then the machine learning algorithm can decide, hey, 1%, oh, I can ignore it, that I can still claim that I'm 99% effective, right? So in this kind of cases, when you formulate your machine learning tasks, you need to look at all the classes or all the groups, regardless, what's the size of those groups, and then you may have to so-called add weights, meaning that let's say the 1% of the so let's say this group only represents 1% of the population, but you want the machine learning algorithm to really give the fair treatment of that group, then you may have to increase its weight, meaning that you actually have to artificially increase its population to, let's say, count for 10%. So you have to add a lot of almost replicas or side variation, and so that you have enough representation of that group. So that kind of work, I would say, is domain specific, meaning that depending on the problem that you try to use machine learning algorithm to address. And I really think that at a high level, you have to be aware of all potential biases and then do something about with the data, right? So that's the first part of the question. Second part about the privacy part, I think it really depends on the application. In some cases, I think actually in a lot of cases, the users or citizens, they're not aware that their privacies can be violated, or they have some naive way notion of privacy, right? So, for example, I think one of the most pressing issue privacy is the video surveillance, right? Closed caption TV, and that I think last year a couple of cities in California, like San Francisco and a few others, they now have banned CCTV because privacy concern. So CCTV, I mean, just so you know that I think on average, every 4 or 5 citizens in the U.S. They share one CCTV. It's a huge number of CCTVs out there, and you can imagine that we are very much quickly entering a surveillance state where anywhere you go, potentially there's a video footage about you. And so the upside is that this is supposed to be very good for security, in particular public safety, right? But then the downside is that, hey, what about privacy? Do you want, a clear picture of your video, like meaning your action or your activities all over all over in the public space be recorded and be available. You don't want that, right? So that's why some of these cities they ban CCTV now. Then the question is, then are you like sacrificing public safety, right? And more recently, I think last maybe 2 months, there are several major vendors, including Microsoft, IBM, I think maybe a few others. They publicly announced that they're not going to do anything with the face recognition technology for a year. Basically, they declare that they're going to have a pause until we figure out how do we solve this privacy issue. I mean, actually, that's an active research areas at Georgia Tech in my group included. We have been actually developing some solutions. We feel like we have a solution. I think one of the perception that citizens don't understand sometimes is say, oh, the camera, they capture our picture, so what? Or even when they send to the server, it's sent in an encrypted link. Yes, but what about when the data is uploaded to the server? Is it always encrypted, or is it in the clear? Or what happen if your pictures and videos are not stored in an encrypted form on a server, right? Once the server is compromised, then people can essentially figure out what you have been doing. So that's a huge privacy concern that sometimes people don't understand. Yeah. I mean, we can make many examples like that. I mean, I think we are really entering a stage where there are a lot of sensors, a lot of surveillance technologies out there. So everything we do is being recorded. I think it's really as a time to act for us to figure out, hey, what's the I think one of my colleagues, Peter Swire, he's a professor at Schiller, he's a privacy lawyer. He was saying that, oh, look, Wenke, I mean, the war, basically he was saying that to stop them from collecting data is hard because they already collected enough and they will continue to collect. I think the war is, can we figure out how the data can be used in a responsible way?
I think to tag on to what Wenke is saying, right? Like, I think the fact, like, videos are just like in your face, like they're collecting your data, and it's like really observing in the form of a video. But data collection is happening all over the place. Like it's happening with our phones, with our purchase patterns, with our search patterns, with our where do we go for coffee? Humans are extremely predictable, and collecting data does make all these recommendation systems or advertisement systems really more efficient. And there's so much data happening. And in terms of violation of privacy, I think one of the really important cases happened with Target when they were looking at purchase patterns, and they realized that a family had a teenager who was pregnant, and they sent some baby coupons to their home because they wanted to capture that consumer. And the parents didn't know that the kid was pregnant. And so that was a huge violation of privacy, I think. So, right. So, I mean, it goes it goes beyond video surveillance. It's and the interesting thing is, like, people often don't understand that all of this data is being collected. And sometimes even when, like, let's take in rating systems, right? People give ratings to Uber drivers, or people give ratings to online workers. They know this data is being collected, and it's bizarre to me that for certain websites like Upwork or TaskRabbit, people have done studies where they show that if a worker's picture is just giving some data about what demographic they're from, then the ratings are also systematically just underreported or overreported. So there is that systematic trend in the ratings, even for, when people know that the data is being collected and people know that this rating is going to affect somebody. So I think it's really, it gives an interesting challenge for machine learning and algorithms to, maybe have algorithms that are socially aware, maybe have algorithms that can fix some of these biases. But as Wenke said, right, like, data is being collected all over.
Everywhere, right? It's happening everywhere. Like how you said that data collection is happening everywhere. So then let me ask you, is there anything we should be doing for ourselves and our children? Like you mentioned that story about the daughter of a Target, customer was sent these coupons. So what can we be doing for ourselves and our families to limit, the impact and to be affected by all of this data that is being collected? What can we do?
So
So
one,
Yeah.
if I may, so I
yes.
would say that you need to be aware when you suppose, let's say when you browse the web, right? You should be aware of the consequence. I mean, I think Swati gave some examples. I mean, so the point is that when so much data is being collected, there's a lot of possibilities that for the vendors or even the third parties, they do the so-called inference attack, right? So they basically correlate multiple stream of data that they have in hand, and they can figure out who you are and what you're doing. So we actually had a experiment with even on the mobile platform, some of the apps, they are not supposed to figure out what you're doing, but the ad library developers, they can actually, based on what ads you actually select, they actually can learn a lot about you. I mean, that makes a lot of sense, right? Because they say, oh, I'm doing this so that I can send you more targeted ads, so that you won't be bothered by junk, right? So in fact, when you look at some of the latest updates from iOS, they tell you, hey, you have an option to select not use the targeted ads versus, you allow us to profile you and use targeted ads. And then they will say, if you're up to not use targeted ads, then the consequence is that you may be bothered by some junk. So it's like basically putting the choice right in front of you. Do you want junk or you want more targeted ads? And so so in fact, I actually do appreciate they being upfront to say, hey, look, I do know that privacy is a concern, but there's always a trade-off, right? So I think understanding the trade-off and forcing how to put it, I don't know whether you use the word force, but I think the vendor should be encouraged to be upfront, tell the users, hey, here's what we're doing, like here's data we are collecting, here's the purpose, right? So there's some privacy, possibly privacy concern that you may have, but the benefits is this, right? And you can choose this, or you can say, no, I don't want it. I want a completely vanilla kind of the like the information service in the mid-90s, right? Have no ads. You can do that too, or I only want junk ads. So that kind of thing. I think I would be much happier if the internet is moving to that state, meaning it's all informed,
It's more
Yeah.
transparent.
and then you make
Hmm.
informed decision.
So
Yeah.
I think
No, you make a good point. Yeah.
let
Yes,
me
Swati.
maybe add to what Wenke is saying, right? Like I think transparency is one aspect of it, but there's a big ethics aspect to it as well, right?
Hmm.
Let's say, I'm a search engine, and often search engines have argued that they're like librarians. They just have data and they want to show that data. It's only very recently, like some companies are saying that we're going to look at, hate speech or fake news, and we are trying to curb that down. That's very recent. So let's say it's the search engine is like a librarian, and the job, let's say we're looking at job advertisements. Now, what Wenke is saying, look, if the search engine has your data, it can show you appropriate job advertisements, right? And so there is a trade-off. Do you want to give your data so you search engine shows you more relevant job ads, or do you not want to give your data so that you're not a target of targeted advertisement, right? But there
Yeah.
is another level to it, because things that might be relevant for you may not be good for you, right? So there have been studies that where researchers showed that Google job ads were showing women lower paying job ads and men more higher paying job ads. Now, these might have been relevant based on past data collected from the initial set of users, but they are not. So they're relevant, but they're not good, right? Like ideally, we want that ethically, both the groups should be shown equally paying job ads if they are equally capable. And then so there's always, I think, these questions are very complex, because there's privacy, there's ethics, there's who has the responsibility. Should it be the responsibility of the search engine to show ads that are good for specific users, or should it be the responsibility of the users to go seek ads or to go seek information that's good for them, right? And so Lien, your question started with, what can we do as computer scientists or as parents, and how can we tell our students or the younger generation to navigate the web? And I think this really ties into what Wenke was saying and how I've been thinking about these problems. That first of all, decide whether you want to give some of your data or not, right? Like be aware that data is being collected and decide whether you want to share that data. What is this data worth to you? And the next question is to just be really critical about. Because what we are seeing, the information we are getting bombarded with really shapes our beliefs, right? Like this is something we've also seen in the last elections. We've seen that social media had a big role to play because, if I only see what my friends like, because that's something that I've been more comfortable with and something that doesn't get me out of my comfort zone, then my beliefs are going to go into that bubble effect, right? Like I don't know what else is out there in the world. I don't know what other information I should have sought. And we don't want to be in these bubbles. We don't want to have this bubble effect propagate. We want to have debates. We want to have discussions. We want to understand the opposing point of view. And right? And that may not be something that's relevant to us from a recommendation sense, but that is something that's better for us as a society moving forward.
Yeah, I think, to your point, algorithms now have become very good at learning what we like and what we don't like,
Yes.
And like you said, this often leads us to being in a bubble with others that have similar beliefs and values. And so you mentioned the election, and I have to ask a question about this year's election. It's by far the most norm-breaking election I've ever seen in my lifetime, and ever since I've been able to vote. And there's new challenges. There's new challenges, I believe, for addressing social justice and even civic engagement in terms of, what people are seeing and hearing, especially on social media. Lots of privacy issues for sure, lots of data collection happening for sure and manipulation, but also, I think as educators, I would say that you're right. It's good for us to hear opposing views and get different perspectives to form our own opinions and be more informed. I believe, though, that we have to learn how to do that. That
Yes.
There has to be a learning process on being able to make, the decisions that are best for us, our families, our lives, and whatnot. But my goodness, the political divide that exists in our country right now is just astounding. And frankly, a little alarming. I mean, to the point where some political experts are concerned about the stability of our democracy because of the manipulation of data, because of how algorithms are being built to feed us information that we're becoming addicted to. So my question, and Swati, if you just want to continue your idea on this, my question is, and I'd like to hear from both of you actually on this, especially with people being so, some of us are keeping to ourselves so that we're safe from COVID, right? 2020 is like we're sort of in isolation. What kind of effects do you think these algorithms and the bubbles are going to have on the election? What are your thoughts on how the use of social media is going to affect the outcomes of the election? What are your thoughts on that?
So I think I want to hear from Wenke first on the fake information and information
Absolutely.
dissemination. I think that's a huge part of it. And then I'll tag along with some swing voters and how social media actually impacts them. But then you threw in the COVID as well. I think that's
it's all
big,
sort of, I think, in the same, it's all, it's impacting us all.
Yeah, so let me just say that, I think we are all on the same page in the sense that we recognize that the information services right now, right, in particular on the web, web-based information services and social media, they're all driven by AI in machine learning algorithm, right? You think about the input, the data is actually what's available on social media or on the web, right? And then another input would be the user's query, user's command, and then the output would be the information that's presented to the user. Now, compare that with the old days when everybody was reading would be reading the same New York Times printed copy. Everybody reading the same information. I mean, that's kind of boring, but on the other hand, nobody can actually really disseminate misinformation without being being discovered because, hey, if your newspaper and mine are different, people say, hey, what the heck, right? Something's wrong. But now, I bet that most of the time when you read the news, that news contents actually, or the news pieces are customized based on interest, right? So I think that trend will continue. If you remember Eric Schmidt, the former CEO of Google, I think a couple of years ago when he was testifying in front of the Congress, he was saying that the dream of Google is that in the future, when you type in a query, you can type in, a few words or even a whole sentence. The Google will figure out exactly what you are looking for. Meaning that what you're typing in may not be really so precise, but they're so smart, they have learned so much about you, they will really understand what you want and give you the information that you really need. And so that would be, okay, wow, that would be awesome, right? On the other hand, one thing that we should ask is say, hey, is that kind of algorithm subject to manipulation, right? Also subject to a privacy violation, right? So my experience is that, remember what I said is that these algorithms, they take the input of data available on the web or available on let's say on a social network platform such as Facebook. Remember, where that data come from? That data is also generated by human. So which means, let's say Google, I don't care how smart you are, your algorithm is taking data that's being generated by people. And you don't have, it's very hard to control who can generate that data. And sometimes those people, you may not even know them or may not be real. For example, those are potentially bots, right? Bots, basically creating, some agent, some software agent that is pumping information. So the point is that, my point is that the data, the input data can be polluted or manipulated. That will affect the outcome. The outcomes of information that you present to the user, right? So unless you design an algorithm that you can detect such kind of manipulation, okay? Otherwise, like I said, this whole process can be polluted actually quite easily. So we actually had written papers many years ago, and the security committee actually was blown away initially. So our attack actually pretty simple, meaning that everybody understands that when you browse a website, sometimes your browser can be compromised because the web page contains some malicious JavaScript. So we did an experiment that the JavaScript will actually issue some queries in the background on behalf of you, and you don't even know those queries have been issued. What we're doing, we actually changing your search profile. Okay, we say, okay, Swati actually likes to see the following. Well, the next time she search something, Google pick up that profile and say, oh, that's Swati, right? We know her. And then so Google will use that change profile to give some results to her. So if I'm an attacker, I can actually, let's say if I know what kind of website that Swati likes to visit, I can actually put in some JavaScript there, insert some of the queries, in the background so that she doesn't even know. Essentially, I can change her profile. That way, I can actually gradually change the information that she's getting. Okay, so then say what's the effect? Think about it. We human, we read information, process it, and then make decision. So our decision actually also depends on the information we're getting, right? So if I can manipulate the information you're getting, guess what? I can also change how you can also change your decision. I mean, you can apply this to, of course, commercial applications, political applications, and so on. We call this whole area called information manipulation. So I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think in terms of election, obviously there's a lot of so like the example I just gave is on search engine. Of course, in the election. There are a lot of examples about social media, right? People on Facebook, Twitter, some of these accounts. In fact, if you ask if you ask these vendors, I mean, they have actually a group within these vendors. Their job is to try to identify fake accounts or bots, right? So meaning that if you are able to generate a lot of fake accounts that look real human, you can create this phenomenon. Oh, a lot of people are big fan of this particular opinion, particular candidate. In fact, that's not. But you can create this kind of illusion that will actually attract people to say, oh, that must be real. right? So that's something that's really dangerous. And I mean, there are a lot of heuristics that people are using to identify this kind of manipulation. For example, if all of a sudden a couple hundred accounts get set up, and then within a day they all became friends, we're like, okay, that doesn't make sense because humans don't become friends in no time. But you never know. I mean, this is an election cycle. People are pretty active. So I mean, I would say that from a security point of view, these kind of things are ongoing struggles. We call it cat and mouse. So I mean, the attacker will come up with something new, and then we as a defender figure out that's what they're doing, and then try to defeat them. So this will be ongoing. Another thing I want to say is that some of these manipulation has actually now become a legitimate, quote unquote, legitimate business. If you actually pay attention to so-called reputation management. So there's such service out there. Suppose you have a business. You want to whitewash your reputation. What do? Well, I mean, if you're a small business or medium-sized business, actually pretty easy to do. So what you do is that these reputation management companies will first of all create a bunch of related websites or including Facebook posting linked to your business, right? And then they can hire people. Mechanical Turks on Amazon hire these people to say your job is to search this company's name, go to the particular page which is they created, and all about positive comments about your business. You go to that page, stare at it for a couple of seconds, and then you can move on. So if they hire enough people doing this, then you're generating data to companies like Google to say, hey, when people search for this company, they want to look at these positive comments. Okay. So which means what? Which means the Google search algorithm would say these pages, they have higher ranking. So then when a kind of a victim user search your business name, boom, all the positive pages will be top 10 in the top 10 results. And that's how you whitewash a company. I also know that, I mean, without naming a name, a major university in California, they fell on this. They were desperate to try to whitewash their reputation after some on-campus protests that they mishandled.
Yeah, I mean, it's happening. It's happening more often now. I think more than ever. And so
but
I
then
wanted
this
to.
university, because they forgot that their university is so big, you cannot hire a couple hundred people to whitewash thousands of people, meaning that your noise is too small, the signal is too strong. So in fact, but they actually spent $100,000 on this and fail. And then the state legislature find out that they spent $100,000 whitewashing themselves, and guess what happened? Whatever the head of the university got fired because of that. But anyway.
I wanted to give Swati a chance to address this question as well. With your courses and the work that you're doing now, what are your thoughts about how AI, machine learning, and data and misinformation is impacting the election?
So I guess a big part is recommendations, right? Like a big part is seeing what other people are seeing and not having enough opportunities for debate, not having enough opportunities for creating that conflict that, I like one candidate and you like the other candidate. Let's sit and talk about it and try to figure out what is, try to make each other, just challenge our beliefs and sort of reach a consensus. I think I would say that, sometimes we have to step back and think about whether a solution has to really come from machine learning and optimization, or whether the solution has to come from just, social interactions. And I was thinking about, the fact that we are all holed up in our homes because of COVID. That's also like a big part of our interaction that's been missing, right? Like just this face-to-face interaction. We're constantly just we're talking to people on our phones, we're seeing TV, we're watching our laptops, we're seeing the news on that. We're not it's having, I think, a much stronger impact on on our mental well-being, on our just the sort of fatigue from reading stuff online. And I was thinking about the Twitter networks as Wenke was talking, that in the last elections, actually, people created these fake bots that would give a lot of similar news messages about one candidate or the other. And people, again, had this information fatigue. If you keep listening to a negative comment about a particular candidate, you're just like, yeah, what's new? Like, there's nothing new. There's nothing that engages you anymore. There's nothing that breaks that pattern. And so coming back to COVID, I think it's important to break the pattern. Maybe, look at news websites that are different from what you're used to. Look at, right? I think that's my maybe the only thing that I want to add to what Wenke already said.
Yeah, you
Yeah, I
mean
also want to
like
say,
don't fall into the trap, right? Like
Don't
if
fall
you get
into
a
the
notice.
trap. Find opportunities. Go to
Yeah,
discussions. There are such amazing
yeah,
discussions happening on campus, following Black Lives Matter protests, following the
yeah,
debates. They're amazing. Like, I see like a lot of groups coming together on campus. In fact, one of my even in terms of research ideas, I am just so happy to be a part of the Georgia Tech environment because, let's say one of my colleagues, so this was a recent conversation I had, like she did this amazing work. She's an interactive computing professor, Munmun Chaudhry. She did this amazing work where they looked at organizational how positive people are feeling about their organizations by analyzing Twitter feeds. And they saw that actually minorities are much more happier in jobs, even when they're paid lesser, because they're just happy, they have a job. And so they seem to be much more happier in their jobs based on their Twitter news feeds. But then this another colleague of mine who's amazing, he's a professor of law and ethics, Devin Desai at Scheller, he asked, okay, but do minorities even have the freedom to say what they want on Twitter? Or do they have this fear of being judged as a model minority? Or do they have this fear of, saying something wrong and actually losing their job? So how unbiased is the data? And as we're sitting in our own departments, like it's harder to have these conversations. And what's really, like, I think uplifting for me is that we're having those conversations now. We are going beyond our research areas. We are going beyond the way we've been trained to think about problems. We are going beyond, the questions we've learned how to tackle in our studies, in our research, and we are really challenging even those. And I think that's the thing that I would as I go and talk to class 2 students or class 5 students about fairness and ethics, that's really what I emphasize. Challenge what, and I don't know if their parents like me for this, but challenge what people are telling you.
understood.
Make your own beliefs and don't fall into, just this is the way I've been taught to do things. Like that's
Right.
yeah.
So I have one last question for you. The show is called Voices for Social Justice. It stands for Voices of Innovative, Compassionate Experts in Society like yourselves. And we wanted to ask you, whose voice has been inspiring for you? It could be an author, or it could just be someone that has been inspiring for you. Who has been an inspirational voice for you?
A lot of people. I think a lot of my mentors, my family, my friends, my students, conversations. Like I think it's hard for me to point out to one person who's been really inspiring. I think I came to US for graduate studies, and just the differences in culture have maybe brought me closer to my own culture. The differences, talking to people with very different viewpoints have helped me realize places where I've been wrong or places where I've been right or places where I need to grow. So I think in terms of inspiration, there've just been so many people who've been inspiring.
Yeah, you draw inspiration from a variety of sources, just like you said, to be able to, surround yourself with different levels of support, I think is important. How about you, Wenke, who's been
Yeah, so I
an
would say
inspiring
that,
voice for you?
given the recent events, I mean, I remember watching the documentary about on RBG. I was just pretty overwhelmed because people would just say, oh, RBG is always on the left, right? She always pursues certain agendas. But if you watch the documentary, I mean, one scene that was really blown away was she was before she even became even close to the Supreme Court. She was handling a case about I think it's a gentleman in the U.S. military, and essentially she fought for his equal rights for kind of leave after the childbirth kind of thing. I was like, wow, that's amazing. I mean, that's like really a testament of you treat everybody equally, right? Another thing that I think more recently I started to realize is that I think as a technologist is easy to just say, oh, I'm focused on my subject. But the thing is, the technologies that we are developing are now affecting people's life in a sort of a much more profound way, right? In particular, AI, right? AI is being used everywhere. So for us not to understand the impact, right? The sort of societal impact, the impact on people's life and potential unfortunate biases, and also privacy violation. All of these things we have to understand, and then so that when we design these systems, we actually are aware of the potential implication, right? So that we develop better system. So, for example, I don't necessarily blame the vendors or inventors of CCTV. I mean, I don't think they did it on purpose to violate people's privacy. They just didn't think about it, right? And so that's an unfortunate situation that we should avoid.
Yeah, yeah. Well, follow the science and the data, and also COVID is real. And and in these
I mean, I
challenging
would say
times,
people actually who try to talk their way about, hey, I don't believe in COVID. I can do whatever, and they will not get to me. Hey, look, why don't you talk to the virus itself about this? Do you think the virus is going to follow your fake facts? I mean, anyway, so that's
right.
that's where the logic kind of breaks down. These people don't follow logic, and that's the very unfortunate situation. Yeah.
Well, I think to both of your points, in these challenging times, and it's COVID, it's misinformation, it's the politics, it's all of it all together. In these challenging times, I think what I want my kids to remember the most during these times is how we took care of each other and
Mhm.
how we kept each other safe. I think that's very important. And thank you so much again, Swati and Wenke, for lending your voice and your expertise to these important issues. We are going to make sure we post information for folks to connect with you, if that's okay with you. We'd like to
Yes.
do that. And also for our listeners, please make sure to follow Constellations on social media at GT_CCEC for the latest updates. And thank you so much, and we'll see you next month.
Thank
Thank you
you.
Thank you
both.
very much.
Thank
Yeah.
you so
Take
much.
care. Yeah. Thank
Take
you.
care.